the NRA was formed in 1871, following the Civil War in New York by a group of Union soldiers, and because they felt the war had gone on for about 2 years longer than it needed to go on because their soldiers couldn't hit anything. And the difference between the North and the South was that the North was recruiting in the newly industrialized cities of the Northeast, and they were recruiting largely first-generation immigrants from Europe where there was no firearms tradition. So many of the, we don't realize this today, but many of the Union soldiers, when they took to the field, the first time they had ever fired a gun was in battle, and they didn't do very well. The saying at the time was that a Confederate soldier was worth 3 Union soldiers. The problem was there were 5 Union soldiers for every Confederate. You know, there are more NRA members in Pennsylvania than any state in the country. There are more hunting licenses sold in Pennsylvania than in any state in the country. Texas doesn't like that, but that's the way it is. And so the attitude outside of downtown Pittsburgh and downtown Philadelphia is very different. They're under attack, and they're under attack by people who are hostile to those values, but who can only succeed if they get people who don't really grasp the importance of those values and aren't familiar with them to go along with them. And my view is always, when I talk about things, I always say the NRA has 2 enemies. One of them is Michael Bloomberg, and the other one is the video game. Because to just get a kid outside, to get him involved in anything that's not that kind of thing today is hard. And we devote a lot of our resources to trying to familiarize people with firearms and the shooting sports and the like. In Chicago today, which is today's murder capital, if you're a criminal, you know 2 things. The first thing is that Chicago has some of the strictest, maybe the strictest, gun control measures in the country. So you know something about your potential pool of victims. Most of them aren't armed. Second thing is that there are 90 federal jurisdictions in which gun crime can be prosecuted. Number 90 in terms of prosecution is the city of Chicago. So you know that if you're a criminal, if you use a gun to commit a crime, you're not going to pay anything additional for doing that. And then they wonder why Chicago is what it is. The guy who killed the little girl who came to the inaugural had been arrested a few weeks before for a gun crime and was released back onto the streets and did exactly what you would have expected him to do. He shot somebody else. That's gun crime, and you can deal with that. You can deal with it by prosecuting criminals who use firearms, and that's been our position all along. And frankly, under the Clinton administration, prosecutions for gun crimes dropped significantly, and that's why we were complaining. Under the Bush administration, they went back up. Under Obama, they've fallen 35%. And there's a reason for that. It's an ideological reason. There are people in the society who don't blame the criminal. You know, the criminal either had, bad potty training, or was poor, or lost his job, or was sick, or did this or that. Our position is that criminals are criminals and you treat them. So their position about that fellow that robbed the convenience store was that there weren't any guns, he wouldn't have been able to use a gun, and therefore it's the gun's fault. We think it was the criminal's fault, and that's a really significant difference. On the other side of the gun violence issue is the mass shooter, and these people are almost exclusively people who, in an earlier day, before the American mental health care system completely collapsed, would be under some kind of control. Right now, people like that are either in prison for other crimes, or they're homeless, or whatever, or they haven't yet been diagnosed because the system doesn't check them. And so one of the things we've suggested is that you use existing law to prosecute gun criminals, and you rebuild the mental health system so that you can deal with the kinds of people that are the sick shooters. And since you can't get all of them, you do need security in almost every place, not just in America, but the Norway shooter, that killed all those people. These people are crazy, and after it's over, they're diagnosed as crazy. So laws that deal with you and me don't get them.
How do you get them before they
Well,
act?
you do 2 things. One of my points, you don't get all of them because you can't. But there are a lot of them that you can get. We've taken the position over the years, and in fact, I went back. You know, the first modern mass shooting, if you will, was remember the Texas clock tower shooting back in the late 60s, Whitcomb? The NRA had an editorial that summer that something had to be done because these kinds of people were basically running loose and getting their hands on guns and doing whatever they will. In 1993, Wayne LaPierre was on Face the Nation, March of '93, with Chuck Schumer, who was then a congressman, not a senator. And Wayne made the point that under the system that was being put together, the National Instant Check System, which is what you go through if you buy a firearm from a dealer, that those who had been adjudicated to be mentally ill were not being put on the system. And in 23 states, the states refused to put them in the system, even if they're violent schizophrenics, because they don't want to demonize the mentally ill. Schumer got up on the air, shook hands with him, and said, "I can help with that." Today, 23 states don't put them in the system. And some of these people are not caught beforehand. The one that would have been caught was the Virginia Tech shooter. If Virginia had been putting those people into the system, they are now, you know, now that the horse is out of the barn, then that guy could not have bought a firearm.